Welcome to my May 2023 webinar. This one on attending to the heart, a truly important topic, particularly following up on last month's webinar on aging and dealing with the fact that we're not perfectly healthy, though we're trying to be. The heart is such an important, I'm going to call it an organ, but it's really the place, the seat of feeling in the body. Of course, we have feelings in the head and feelings in the gut, in the intestines, and feelings elsewhere in the body as well. But the feelings in the heart are the warm, tender feelings that we care about. We usually call those love. And then the parts where love is not fulfilled, the feelings of, guilt, shame, things like that, that can really make us very uncomfortable. Generally, we think of love as warm, fuzzy, tender feelings of positive regard and caring that we have for other people. And that's that feeling level of love. But there is also a state of appreciating the finest material values of existence, which is really more of a state of love than a feeling. And so tonight's lecture is going to deal a lot with the difference, which we don't usually recognize, but the difference between feelings of love, where I say, oh, I feel love for somebody. I care for them. They're important to me. And I feel connected to them and I feel attached to them. And when things happen to them, they happen to me too. Kind of feeling that we share that empathic connection with people. So those are the feeling level of love, but the state of love has to do with the mechanics of perception, and it's related to the development of higher states of consciousness. As we develop higher states of consciousness, we get an increasing ability to perceive the subtler values of creation. And that's done not with our sense organs in the gross sense of the eyes and the ears, the eyes seeing and the ears hearing, but it's done on the level of consciousness, is kind of intuitive knowing. But again, it's vision, it's sight, touch, taste, smell. And so learning to recognize that we're having a state of love and what that implies for our loving other people, or loving our environment, loving our friends and family, that the implications of that are just huge. We're all very familiar with loving, with the feeling of love, pardon me. We know what that feels like. It's a familiar feeling. And sometimes we go a period of time where we're really not feeling much love. Things happen in our life. We lose people, and we feel the loss and the grief, or things happen and we feel badly about them. We either feel, if we're responsible, we feel guilty or ashamed. If others are responsible, we may feel anger, resentment. We may blame them for whatever it was that they did or didn't do. And so there's so much feeling tied up in love. A good while ago, I did a webinar, and in the webinar, I talked about some of the things that go on in the heart, and I presented some material that was entirely mine, where, because in my experience, the heart is divided into three sections. There's a lower heart vessel. I call it a vessel because it contains feelings. Lower heart vessel, a middle heart vessel, and an upper heart vessel, which is under the manubrium sternum. So the manubrium is here, and then the body, the sternum, is going to be off the bottom of the picture, I'm afraid. Can I get down there? Kind of, yeah, down here. And that's the middle heart vessel. And then the lower heart vessel is right above the diaphragm. And the lower heart vessel has a lot to do with hurt, rejection, and grief or loss. So those kind of things that happen in our lives where we lose people either through death or they move away, or maybe we just get in an argument and they withdraw from our lives. Those kind of losses and grief can affect the lower heart vessel. And then when people reject us, particularly when we extend ourselves to them and they push us away and turn their backs on us, that kind of rejection affects the lower heart vessel. The middle heart vessel is particularly susceptible to criticism, accusations from others. Although we can turn that on ourselves too, we can accuse ourselves. Indictments, which means that it's like an accusation, but it's putting a label on somebody that they are a bad person or that they've done something wrong. Judgments, which most of us do a lot, where we look at somebody and we say, "Oh, that's not a very good person," or "I don't like that person." Then blaming, also blaming and complaining, is a big part of the middle heart vessel. Hostility, and then guilt and shame. So there's a whole variety of negative feelings that are in the middle heart vessel. And these feelings can be directed, of course, at oneself. They can be directed at others or directed at us by others, from others. And then the upper heart vessel is where we experience disappointment, frustration, and resentment, jealousy, bitterness. Again, that can be directed at ourselves or at others, or it can be received, directed at us from others. The reason I mention these things is because we are susceptible to the criticisms, the accusations, the judgments of others, and the internalized processes that give us guilt and shame and grief. And so when we're talking about being healthy and staying healthy throughout a lifetime, we need to be constantly clearing out any of these negative feelings that come up. And that's not always easily done, in the sense that we don't always recognize exactly what's going on. We may feel bad. We may have a particular disease even, and not really recognize that, because when the heart gets blocked, then it blocks the flow of energy in the lower chakras of the body and at the diaphragm, and then physical disease develops in the body. And a lot of times in our culture, we learn that the physical disease is what needs to be treated. And that may be true in the sense that, well, if there's physical symptoms going on that are, producing ill health and suffering, we may need to treat those, but we may not successfully treat either the immediate symptoms or consequences long term. We may not prevent those consequences if we don't get to the root of what's going on emotionally in the body. And so when I say attending to the heart, the subject of tonight's presentation, what I'm talking about is recognizing the negative feelings that are building up inside of us, and dealing with those, putting our attention on those, and giving them a chance to work their way out. And we have lots and lots of techniques for dealing with that. And transcending is the most important of those, of course, because we transcend that level of feeling and give that a chance to dissipate, let that energy go. And so transcending is always the most important. And then there's a whole lot of other techniques that we can use to help those feelings unravel, so that the energy, we're not holding that energy, which is usually tightened. The way I experience it, it's tightened up. It's like in a knot, and the energy isn't flowing through our body. And when people are seriously ill, typically the energy knots, there are multiple energy knots in the body, and disease is, it strikes me the disease is inevitable. And there's an opportunity though to do a lot about that, a lot about the disease. But we're going to have to work at a very fine level. To give you an example, I was working with someone just recently, and they had some bad feeling, and they knew that, but they didn't know the significance of it. And they were also in pain. And as soon as I looked into their energy field, I noticed that a good part of their energy was displaced outside their body. I hadn't seen that in it's been a little while. So I was really struck by it. But it's the kind of thing that in my work is something you have to attend to. And fortunately, even though there was enough bad feeling to push that personal energy away, and that made them weak and made them ill, it was relatively easy to get that part back into the body. And that was a really nice thing to see. And they didn't want to hold on to it, was the key thing. They didn't know exactly what was going on, but they didn't want to hold on to it. And so I got in there and worked with the part that was hurting, and that relaxed, because basically the fundamental nature of the person was to be happy and healthy. And so we were able to draw on the fundamental strength of the body and positive outlook of the person to make the negative feeling feel at home, and it just dissipated and relaxed, and the displaced part of their energy was able to move back in. So that gives you a kind of illustration of the kind of dynamic that can happen in a person's energy. And of course, I feel very blessed to be able to work at that level, because real change is possible in a very short period of time. And you can't always predict that, but of course, the more fundamentally happy and, so you might say, together that a person is, meaning that they don't wallow in suffering, but they try to maintain a positive outlook and be happy in life. That works really, really well. Now, I wanted to say a few things more about the state of love. The state, it's called a state because it's not a situation where energy moves and attaches itself to a particular situation or relationship. We don't love somebody, we do love them, but we don't love them in the feeling of, oh, I'm attached to them, and what they do matters to me. And if they happen to I'm just going to say scorn me at a particular moment, that I feel just so hurt and sad and lonely and lost, that that I'm in that dependent kind of state, and that's the most superficial value of that attachment, of the feelings of love. When we perceive the wholeness of a situation in its divine glory, the subtle level of perception, using the subtle value of senses rather than the gross value of senses, then it's possible to just be in love as a state. And then whatever comes in is interpreted and seen in that kind of love. I was asked in a consultation about dealing with a situation with a medical healthcare provider, and they were kind of in a conflict situation between the patient and their healthcare provider. And what I said to them basically was, can you ask your physician if they can work with you as you work through your feelings about possibly needing medical care, medicine, in other words. And give the physician through that, by using that approach, to give the physician the opportunity. They aren't necessarily going to take it, but hopefully they will. To give them the opportunity to care for you as a person, rather than to follow a formula from a textbook about how to manage your problem. And I think that was helpful, although the patient still needed to work a little bit on the idea that, oh, it's not just me in a fight, but me in a relationship with somebody that has so far been kind of off-putting. And so we'll see how that one comes out. But again, it's a matter of shifting perspective from the gross level of functioning of the senses to that subtle value of the functioning of the senses, where we can really appreciate the quality of the creation and appreciate the quality of everything in the creation and everybody in the creation. And I hope that's clear. Somehow, as I'm saying it, it doesn't feel like it might be so perfectly clear to me, but I hope it's clear enough. That may be new information for some, but I'm hoping that in this modern age, that even though we're so caught up in the material values of existence, that there is something inside of us that just knows, that just experiences that subtle value of creation, so that, you can say, wow, it's a really busy street, but there's so much happening, so much going on. It's so full of energy, that it just appears delightful. That was possibly kind of a strange example, but it worked for me. And I'll be looking for other examples. When we do the group clearing session in a little bit, you can use your own examples to work through in your own life situations of loving and not loving. I'll just say not loving and not list negative feelings. So anyway, two values: feelings of love and a state of love. Feelings of love bind us to our life. They're good. They're not bad to have, but they can trap us. And so we're going to work through in a few minutes getting untrapped from feelings of love. But feelings of love make it possible to have a family and live in a community and have friends and have a life. But then the state of love involves the refined perception and a state of self-sufficiency, non-attachment, through the universal adoration of all creation. Non-attachment through the universal adoration of all creation. And that's a delightful state to be in. Now, as one begins to develop that, there can be a sense of detachment, that is, not being attached, and a sense that I'm missing out. But that's only because the richness of the experience of universal adoration has not developed to the point where we can be completely comfortable being completely independent. And being completely independent and non-attached does not mean that we can't continue in a relationship. We certainly can continue in a relationship, because that relationship is on the feeling level of love and may also have a large measure of that state of love. That state of love can be found in that. I remember Marcy explaining that, it's through that really deep loving and trusting and that close relationship that we can feel safe enough to open up that very fine level of perception, which otherwise is so different that we tend to shrink away from it. We don't necessarily, we can. But we're so used to defining love as an attachment that when you first begin to define love as without the attachment, that can be kind of disconcerting. I think I've said that better that way. But gradually, then both learn to coexist with each other and support each other. And so we can be in love and be loving. Being in love is a feeling, right? I feel that I'm in love with somebody. And then being the state of love where we're just enjoying and appreciating the glory of whatever it is that we're attending to, or whomever that may be. So that's the basic idea that I wanted to convey tonight. Fairly simple, but I think it's actually very profound if you understand what I've been saying. And as we go through the group clearing session, we'll work on the mechanics of bringing that state of love into our awareness, so that we can enjoy both values of love very clearly and very strongly. So with that, I'm going to invite anybody who may have a question or a comment to use the chat function. If you can't find it, you can use the Q&A. But if you can use the chat function, then I will see your question and I'll repeat it for the group. If you want everybody to be able to see what you write, then where it says to in your comment, then you put to everyone. It's a drop-down menu and you only have two choices. To everyone or to the panelists and host. I'm the host and there aren't any panelists, so it's just me that sees it. So I'm not seeing anything come up. I do hope that this distinction that I've drawn tonight appears useful, even if it's not immediately apparent how to do it, how to make that distinction. I hope that it at least sounds interesting and something that, as you continue to evolve and continue to develop refined perception, that the state of love becomes more of a living reality for you on a day-to-day basis, moment-by-moment basis. It's really quite sweet because it allows you, as that example I gave about a patient and their physician, it allows you to have a perspective on things that are happening that's very loving in the usual sense of the word, because you see a person as they are and in their deeper values. Okay, that seems to be it. So I'm going to draw this presentation portion to a close. We will have a presentation next month on the second Tuesday of the month. That'll be the month of June. And I don't have the date in front of me, but I'll try to get the calendar in a little bit. I don't have a topic, but we might just work on whatever concerns you. Have one of those kind of sessions where we just work on whatever concerns you. It's be like a private session, only it won't. That'll be June 13th. Somebody looked up the date for me. Thank you very much. I should have done that beforehand. June 13th will be the next webinar. You can put that on your calendar, 8 o'clock. And I have a feeling we're going to be just working on whatever concerns you. Okay, then we're going to sign off from this part and stop the recording.